Hello, it's Thursday. It's 2:30 Central Time. That must mean it is a Sikich Live. Today, on our 38th episode, we are going to be talking about the technology considerations for SPACs. Now, a SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company, and we're going to talk more in depth about what that is, why they become popular, and we're going to bring on some guests to do that. I am your host, Ryan, and you know what? Let's bring on our guests right now. We have Brad Hoffman as well as James Ingram, and they are here to talk about SPACs, the technology that's needed to power them, and what we can do about that. So I think probably the best way that we can start is maybe, Brad, with you. How does a SPAC work?
So, as you mentioned, the SPAC is a special purpose acquisition company. So what is that? So that is a investment vehicle set up by investors. They create an IPO, they raise funds for this IPO with the intent of purchasing another company within 24 months. So the funds that are raised through that IPO, they go into an interest-bearing account. While they search for that company, that money is acquiring interest. Once they decide on a target entity, they make that acquisition. Those initial investors have an opportunity at that point in time to continue to invest in that SPAC and that new company, or to withdraw those funds with their interest and principal that they've received through that 24-month period. But the key piece of this is that acquisition needs to take place within 24 months of the founding of the SPAC. If that does not happen, the SPAC liquidates. All the investors get their money back with that interest.
Okay, and with that, though, we've been hearing a lot about these lately. A lot of celebrities get into them. A lot of media and a lot of coverage on these SPACs. Why have they become so popular?
Yeah, I think like a lot of things in the business world today, part of it was driven 100% by the pandemic. There's a lot of uncertainty, I would say, over the last 12 to 14 months in the capital markets, right? So you didn't see as many traditional IPOs over that course of time. Yet we still have investors, we still have people that want to put money into the market. And so SPACs was an easy way to do this. So that's driving it. People are also looking for alternative investments. There's been a lot of private equity that's gone into the market over the years, traditional IPOs, things of that nature. Well, people want to diversify from an investment standpoint. They're looking for better returns. SPACs appeared at one point in time to eventually provide that to those investors. It's also a great way. I mentioned the investment from the private equity firms over the past 10 years. It's a great way for those companies that have invested in private firms to exit the market. So instead of going through an IPO on their own to receive return on their investment or selling that to another private equity firm or other entity, they get acquired by a SPAC. So it's a pretty easy exit strategy for those folks. And then for other companies too that want to be public, the traditional IPO process is time consuming. There's a lot of regulation involved. And so this is a little bit of an easier process. It can happen much more quickly than a traditional IPO. So that's attractive as well. And that's been driving the activity over the past year or so.
So there's quite a bit of, talk about SPACs. There's quite a bit of companies kind of exploring those options. Mm-hmm. We've talked a little bit about, they're kind of special. They're kind of a different vehicle. What types of regulatory requirements does a SPAC have?
And so that's where the system part of it becomes very important. So they're still treated as a publicly traded entity, right? So they've gone through the IPO process. They have investors. They have the capital. So they're still subject to SEC regulations, even though they're not operational. It's just a shell company. They're still subject to those regulations. So what does that mean? So at the very high level, they've got to produce quarterly financial reports, 10Qs. They have to produce annual financial reports, 10Ks. So all those need to be generated through a system that has the proper internal controls to give investors assurance that those numbers are accurate, right? And then as they're getting closer to the targets, the acquisition targets, and they're identifying those companies that they're potentially looking at acquiring, they have to start producing pro forma financial statements. Say, what do our financials look like if we go through this acquisition process? So that's a lot of it comes down to financial reporting, but again, meeting those requirements that the SEC is putting out in front of them. So, and actually, SPACs have been back in the news lately. The SEC, I think due to the overall activity of SPACs over the past year, there's been a lot of money flowing in, so that always gets the attention of regulators, right? So they've had a little bit less controls over them as like a traditional IPO process. So the SEC's got their eyes on SPACs now. They're looking to potentially add some regulations around disclosures that the SPACs are providing, the way they're accounting for some of this investor money and warrants and other things. So SPACs have the eye of the SEC for sure right now. So I think the regulatory world is changing. It's going to be even greater for them moving forward. But as of right now, though, it is kind of the, hey, let's produce a 10Q, 10K, those performas. And those are the big items from a regulatory standpoint as of right now. But definitely that is changing moving forward.
And you did mention systems and kind of how these can help handle that. And I'm sure as things evolve, those systems will play a role in that. But Jim, let's get you in on this a little bit here. What are some of the considerations for the infrastructure that you need in place for these SPACs?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. So realistically on the infrastructure, right? So I think number one, you're looking at not just SPACs, but just more companies in general. Since the last 15 or 16 months, you're looking much more at a cloud solution, right? So you can work remotely, specifically, obviously, with the SPACs. But overall, your infrastructure needs, they're really going to be driven by two things: whether you're a pre or a post acquisition SPAC, right? So from the pre-acquisition side, that phase, you have very minimal operations, so it's very simple, right? There's not many. And so you're handling things like your financials, right? Your GL, AP, and then as kind of Brad had said, the complexity really is around the financial reporting and compliance, right? So having that infrastructure to handle those things like SEC reporting, the control requirements, those items that a public company need is critical. And then for a post-acquisition, that's a little bit more vague and nebulous, right? So those infrastructure requirements certainly will change post-acquisition, but until you really know what industry you're going to be in, that's really going to drive those, right? So if you're a preclinical life science organization, your requirements are going to be much different than a manufacturer.
And Ryan, I want to chime in real quick here too. So from a system perspective, it's important for the regulatory side, but it's also, important from the investment side. So investors want to see that you have that infrastructure in place, the right systems in place as you move forward as an organization. So you have to look at it from, okay, what technology are we using at the SPAC level to produce the reports and meet the regulatory needs? But also, hey, those target acquisitions, what systems are they running, right? And what are they operating on? Do they have the infrastructure in place to meet these regulatory requirements? So that's also a very, very important piece of it. So the investors have to have confidence, right, that you have those plans in place, both pre and post acquisition.
So it sounds like there's a lot of investment that goes into with finding the right solution. So what do you need to do to look for that, when it comes to considering the right solution and, kind of the other requirements laid out there?
Yeah. So in terms of an investment, there's your initial investment, which for pre-acquisition SPACs is going to be, fairly, as I say, kind of minimal, right? Because your requirements are minimal. If you're selecting the right solution, right, your initial cost to get an ERP stand up for a SPAC, you're talking around 75 grand in total in terms of licensing and services, right? Like I said before, and like Brad said before too, you're handling things like GL, AP, the financial reporting piece is critical. So finding that correct solution now and in the future is very important, right? And I think the key thing here is, finding that correct solution, right? At this phase, not only do you have to handle the initial requirements, you also need to select a solution that can grow and scale with you over time and very quickly, right? So being able to pivot, right? Using a proven platform that can handle the short and long-term goals, especially from the financial reporting aspect, and handling a public company is important, right? So the last thing you want to do is paint yourself into a corner. You need to be able to pivot. You need to flexibility is going to be key. And like we said before, because these SPACs may operate in multiple different industries, finding that correct solution that can handle all those different industries is important as well.
So at Sikich, we do a lot of, kind of these technology implementations, bring a whole lot of systems online, work with a bunch of different companies across a whole bunch of range of industry. Fit with a company and a partner, a technology partner is really key. So what types of questions should somebody in a SPAC be asking somebody like a Sikich, if they're the right fit?
Yeah, and I often think sometimes, especially the first time you look into an ERP solution, I think partner fit is often overlooked. And in my opinion, finding the right partner is just as important, if not more so, than finding the right solution, right? So if you're SPAC and you're looking for the right partner, to me, the number one question, it's like, are you working with somebody that has a tremendous amount of experience helping companies go public? Right, so that number one is going to be incredibly important, right? And making sure that a partner understands the compliance and regulatory requirements to help you in setting up that system, short and long term. And also, too, is this a partner that has worked with companies that have scaled and grown quickly, right? Because designing the solution to accommodate for that is important, and you want to be able to fuel that growth rather than slow it down. Another thing that's really important is ask your partner, try to understand their implementation methodology, right? Are they, do they have a process-driven, methodology that allows you to design the solution now to handle the issues, but also kind of prepare for that future? Like I said before, right? Not painting yourself into a corner. Flexibility is the key. And one of the things that I kind of waited to talk about it on here is in terms of the investment, right? Does the partner you're working with, can they provide you a predictable cost model, right? So SPACs, understanding what their future expenses are going to be and having that almost locked in from your partner is going to be very important. And then honestly, the last thing is, does that partner offer ongoing support, right? The support you're going to get from a partner, especially somebody like Sikich, is going to be vastly different than the vendor, right? So, I always jokingly say that you don't want to deal with somebody and have that, Russian roulette wheel of the help desk, right? You want to work with a partner that when you pick up that phone, you're going to get in touch with people very quickly that know you. They had a hand in designing and implementing your system. So you just don't have that constant re-education of who you are and what do you do.
And Brad, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, Jim, mentioned many times you don't paint yourself in a corner. So I think it's important to talk to a partner too that maybe doesn't work with just one ERP product, right? There's not a single ERP product out there that works for every possible business or scenario, right? So having someone who can objectively say, this is the right product for the situation and for what you're trying to do is extremely important. We don't like a firm like Sikich works with all the Microsoft products and NetSuite. We use the right tool for the job, right? We don't have to try to put that square peg into a round hole. So that's very important. And I think as well, start asking about what other complementary services do you offer? Do you offer tech service outside of just ERP consulting, right? Because a CRM system may be a future need for this entity. Security, I mean, it's all over the headlines, especially with this JBL data breach over the weekend, and more foreign breaches it looks like that are coming potentially. So does your firm offer those security type services to make sure that this probably a cloud-based software that you're going to be implementing? Do you have the environment set up that it's safe and secure So you have confidence that that data is going to be secure from anybody trying to get in from the outside. So those are some of the things that I think that people aren't thinking about necessarily when interviewing and talking to ERP providers, but they're all part of the equation. It's all interrelated, and I think those are definitely some areas that you need to look when you're looking for the right partner.
And it sounds critical for kind of the SPAC world as well, because they could go so many different avenues.
Yeah.
So thank you, gentlemen, for all of your insight onto SPACs. Brad, Jim, appreciate you being here on the show and giving your expertise on the matter here. And with that, if anybody has more questions about anything that you saw here on the program today, you can go visit www.sikich.com. You can also go to LinkedIn and search Brad and Jim, and I'm sure they would love a connection request so that you guys can get more details, more information to whoever has questions about specific things that we touched on today. To everybody, we'll see you next Thursday again at 2:30 Central. Thank you all for watching Sikich Live, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.